Shalom Israel, Shalom, Shalom. Brother Naquam, watchman for Israel, coming back at you with these precepts. And then the cold cut, giving, of course, our honor and glory to Yahweh, Bahashima Mashiach, Wamalak Bashar. Double honors to the elect elders of the house of David that's been in this truth for decades and decades. So like you're patiently waiting and laboring for the second coming of our Lord Yahweh Shai. A hearty, mighty shalom to all of the mighty men of the Most High God who are out there in the highways and byways, pushing this truth, magnifying the ministry, presenting their bodies as a living sacrifice, and enduring all things for the elect's sake. Shalom to those men. Shalom to all of the men that may not be out there in the highways and byways as of yet, but they're working on it. They're getting built up in the spirit. They're praying. They're fasting. They're studying. They're being diligent and abounding in the work of the Lord. Shalom to those men. Shalom to the Aquath out there, the sincere sisters out there, zealous, diligent, and on fire, and moving in the spirit of our righteous foremothers. Shalom to the ancient men. Shalom to the children. Shalom to the elected visitors scattered abroad throughout the four corners of the earth. And shalom to everybody tuning in live. Yvette McKellar, HBK Ent, Yazian David, Yehuda Israel, Yakar Salah, Shalom King, Don Israel to me, Jay, Kyoko Banyumyan, Server 144K, Ephraimite Ak, Benaiah 7, KOY Kazak, Rocco Merriweather, Benjamin Youngwolf, Shalom King, Kalaya, and everybody else tuning in and that will tune in, Lord willing. Ancient history and timelines, Ezekiel chapter 17 and 19. So we're going to dive into this ancient history through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashmi Awashai, right? Because Yahweh Bashmi Awashai deals with knowledge, right? He deals with knowledge, and the Most High said in Ecclesiasticus chapter 5 and 15, be not ignorant in anything, right? Let's get that real quick in Sirach 5 and 15. So when you come into this knowledge, you want to be well-rounded. You want to be well-rounded. You want to know the timelines and the chronology, first and foremost, because this is your history, right? This is your heritage. This is our heritage, our history. We spent ample years, and some people spent thousands of, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars going to the so-called white man's private institutions, public colleges, different universities, seminary schools, and learning things that did not pertain to them, right? Edomite, Hamite, Moabite history, right? But now when the Most High gives you your history, you need to take that by the horns, man, right? And get in that fast lane and learn as much as you can about your heritage and our history, our kings, our timelines, right? So you want to be able to know this for your sake and your edification, but also a lot of this history, you need to know this because when you read the latter chapters in the Bible, they make references, certain prophecies reference to history. When you read the book of Joshua, you read the book of First Samuel, Second Samuel, First Kings, Second Kings, even going back to the book of Ruth, even in Judges, you have to read that history, right? But let's get Sirach 5 and 15. Be not ignorant in anything in a great matter or a small. The word ignorant means without knowledge, right? So you want to be a brother or a sister, right? Especially you brothers out there in the highways and byways. You want to be well-rounded in the milk, which is the fundamental, the principles and the elements of the Most High and its truth, the basics, if you will. You want to be well-rounded in history. You want to know your timelines, certain dates. You want to know your chronology, the sequence of events throughout time, right? You want to know a little bit of the Hebrew. You may have to know a few words or structures of things in the Greek. Etymology, you want to know the etymology that often goes back to the Latin, right? You want to know prophecy. You want to know how, first and foremost, to apply these precepts, right? You want to understand all of the different realms of this knowledge, right? And you don't want to be, what's the word I'm looking for? You don't want to be one track minded in its truth. There's another word I'm looking for, most I willing that comes to me. But you don't want to be one track minded, man. All you do is focus on prophecy, but you don't know any history. You haven't read the book of Genesis. You have no idea who Joseph is, because all you do is read Daniel, Revelation, Ezekiel, and Zechariah. And you also don't just want to read the history all day. All you do is read Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, and you stop at Ruth, right? You just stop right there, man. You don't know anything about the New Testament. You don't read the epistles. Again, you want to be well-rounded. Did not the Most High say in Proverbs, right? Let's get this in Proverbs chapter 15, right? In 28. The heart of the righteous studieth to answer, but the mouth of the wicked poureth out evil things. So your mind should be fixated on studying, right? That's part of this truth, man. Studying is part of this truth, right? Taking that time, right? That hour, 45 minutes, 30 minutes. If you had 10 minutes on your break, any time that you have, you want to capitalize on that time, right? And not give yourself over to surfeiting, endless scrolling on social media, binge watching television for God knows how long. You want to take time to study and study to answer, right? And again, for you brothers on the highways and byways, you want to study to answer those who have questions, sincere sheep. You may have a demon that come up, a scoffer, those that try the spirit, you know. These are the things that the men of the Lord should be focused on. So we're going to go into some history, some ancient history in the book of Ezekiel, the 17th chapter, and we're going to also touch on the 19th chapter, right? Most High willing. So this is Ezekiel chapter 17 and 1. Right now, remember, Ezekiel was a prophet during the time of the Babylonian Empire, right? He was a prophet during the timeline or the time period of the Babylonian Empire, the Neo-Babylonian Empire, if you will, 626 to 539 BC, right? They started with Nebuchadnezzar, then you had Nebuchadnezzar II, you had these different kings, Merodach, Baladan, etc., and their final king was Nabonidus, right? Some scholars argue Belshazzar, Nabonidus. You know, we hold to Nabonidus being one of the last kings. Now, let's go into let's get this timeline, right? We'll type in timeline of kings and prophets, right? Timelines of kings and prophets. Because Jake, you know who's the first president, how many terms not Frederick Douglass, Theodore Roosevelt and Franklin Roosevelt served, right? You know all of these things, but you have to also know these timelines of the prophets, right? So let's see if how accurate this is, right? Going into the kings. All right, this is good. This is accurate, right? So this is the kings and prophets of Israel and Judah, and right here on the left is what you call a legend. Right, it's called a legend or a key, right? And it's color coded, so you can know what you're looking for. Anything in this teal color they reference a good king. Anything in the gray, these are bad kings, kings that didn't serve the Most High, made the people naked, transgressed against the Heavenly Father, right? And you have evil, wicked kings, right? Ahab, Manasseh. Then you have prophets that were for the southern kingdom in that dark green, and in this dark blue, you have prophets of the northern kingdom. So that's how you kind of can decipher what you're looking at on this map. Now you can see that these are all of the different kings that ruled, right? And they're starting with who? You're starting with Saul from around 1051 to 1011 BC, right? And this may be off a year or two, but this is pretty accurate, right? And they actually give you the accounts. He reigned. You can read about him in 1 Samuel, Salakia, the 9th chapter, all the way up to 1 Samuel, the 31st chapter. Then he had David. You can read about David in 1 Samuel, the 16th chapter, all the way up to 1 Kings, the 2nd chapter. Right? Then you had Solomon, etc. So these are the different kings that you go through. Now you also have the prophets that are right here. Right? You have the northern kingdom prophets and the southern kingdom prophets. Remember, Ezekiel didn't prophesy during the days of Jeroboam, during the days of Nadab, right? He prophesied during the days of our exile and our captivity. So getting straight to the point, we're going to scroll. If you want to check this out more on your own, it's visualtheology.church, right? You can look it up on your own. And we're going to actually go to the time of Ezekiel. So when you read about these prophets right here, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel, these are what you call contemporaries, contemporary prophets, right? Let's pull up the word contemporary. Slocky, bear with me. contemporary prophets meaning. Okay, I want the word contemporary, right? We may just get the word. Okay, contemporary, con meaning width, and tempo or temp meaning time, right? So these are people who live within the same time. It says living or occurring at the same time. If you break this down etymologically, it goes back to the Latin, right? So it's people living at the same time. Certain men actually walked the earth and lived and breathed during the same time. And these men did. Habakkuk actually fed Daniel when Daniel was in the lion's den. You can read that in the Bell and the Dragon account, right? You can read about Jeremiah weeping and wailing during the days of Josiah, the king. And right now we're dealing with who? Ezekiel, right? Ezekiel the prophet. And he's around, they have his reign roughly around his prophethood, or his ministry rather, right? Roughly around 609 BC or so, right? But he was really, primarily during around 597 or so BC, right? Because he was part of the second siege that was taking place by the Babylonians, right? Remember, they had 3 sieges. You had one in 605 BC that took Daniel the prophet and other men captive. Then you had another siege in 597 BC that took Ezekiel and other men captive. You had another siege in the days of Jeremiah in 586 BC. So all these prophets were victims of the sins of Israel and the Babylonians all at the same time. So you want to understand his timeline and his history through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Basham Yahushua, right? And if you got to print this out, blow it up, put it somewhere, so you can look at it or download it and get into this history, man. So you actually have you can have more of a foundation when it comes to understanding what you're reading. You're not just reading words off of a page that don't mean anything to you. Now you're beginning to grasp how this relates to you in your studies and your life, man. Right? So going back to this, Ezekiel chapter 17 and 1. And the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, put forth a riddle and speak a parable unto the house of Israel. And the parable is an illustrated story that describes real life events. Let's see if we can get the etymology. I don't want that site. Let's see, etymology. I believe this is right. Let's go into that word. Okay, I must have switched it up a little bit. All right, but let's go into this word parable. All right, parable. It reads allegorical or metaphorical narrative, usually having a moral for instruction. Right, that's what it means. Something is a parable or it's parabolic. Right, it goes back to the Latin word parabola. Right, which means comparison. So you'll see the Lord speak about an eagle, right, with long feathers and diverse colors. He's comparing the strength and the wingspan of an eagle, how much land it covers, to an empire or a king, right? You'll read about Yahushua likening us in a parable unto what? Seeds that are planted that grow up in different fashions. Some are plucked up by the roots. Some are withered by the sun. Some are choked by thorns, and some are on good ground. So that's what a parable is. It's a comparison. All right. It says literally a throwing beside, meaning when something is next to something. Para meaning alongside, and bow meaning throwing, right, or casting. So all it is you're speaking an allegorical or metaphorical story, right, which compares to real life events and morals and instructions. That's all the parable is. So you don't read this and think that this is literal, right? This is not literal. Let's read it again. Ezekiel 17 and 2. Son of man, put forth a riddle and speak a parable unto the house of Israel. And the Most High deals with riddles. He deals with dark sayings, similitudes, allegories, right? And say, Thus saith Yahweh, a great eagle with great wings, long-winded, full of feathers, which had diverse colors, came unto Lebanon and took the highest branch of the cedar. Right, and this great eagle is symbolic for who? The Babylonian Empire, chiefly Nebuchadnezzar. Right? Men are likened unto eagles, beasts, lions. We ourselves are likened unto doves, sheep. Esau's likened to a serpent, a dragon. Right? Let's get a quick precept on men being eagles and birds and fowls of the air. Let's go to the Apocrypha. Right? Let's go to 2nd Ezra, the 12th chapter. Right? Let's go to 2nd Ezra chapter 12 and 11. It reads, the eagle whom thou sawest come up from the sea is the kingdom which was seen in the vision of thy brother Daniel. So although Ezra saw an eagle, now his dream and vision is being expounded that what? It was actually representing a kingdom. That's what you call a parable, a comparison. The violent nature of the eagle is compared to the behaviors of the so-called white man as the Roman Empire. That's why let's go to Hosea chapter 12 and 10. Right? Let's go to Hosea 12 and 10. Now, this may be fundamental to brothers, and to other brothers, this may not be. And even if you may know this already, you got to go back over it again. Right? You can't say, well, I know that, I'll never read it again. You have to go back over these breakdowns, these accounts, these chapters. You have to go back over these things again, or you'll lose it. Right? Hosea chapter 12 and 10. I have also spoken by the prophets, and I have multiplied visions and used similitudes by the ministry of the prophets. So the prophets move in a spiritual fashion, and they speak in similitudes, right? A comparison. They speak in parables, right? So you see in 2nd Ezra 12 that eagles are what? Are likened unto men. Beasts are likened unto men, right? Let's get another precept. Let's go to Isaiah, right? Chapter 46. See, that's what the Most High said, through thy precepts, right? Through thy precepts, I get understanding. Therefore, I hate every false way. Isaiah 46 and 11. Calling a ravenous bird from the east, the man that executeth my counsel from a far country. Yeah, I have spoken it. I will also bring it to pass. I have proposed it. I will also do it. So you see, the Most High he's really talking about Cyrus, right? So-called Cyrus the Great. What is he being likened to? Let's read it. Let's read the first part of this verse again. Isaiah 46 and 11. Calling a ravenous bird from the east. Why is he from the east? Because he came out of Persis, which was a province of the Median Empire. And he took down Astyages around 552 BC. He came from the east, and he took down the entire Median Empire, from Ecbatana to Persepolis to all these different lands. And he had 120 or 107 provinces from India to Ethiopia. So he's likened to a ravenous bird from the east, and he's called the man that executeth my counsel from a far country, because Persis, when you look it up geographically, is far from the land of Israel. Right? Let's get one more. Right? Let's get one more witness. Hosea chapter 8 and verse 1. Set the trumpet to thy mouth. He shall come as an eagle against the house of the Lord, because they have transgressed my covenant and trespassed against my law. Now, he is what? The Assyrians, right? Because remember, Hosea prophesied to the northern kingdom, and they were eventually taken out around 722 BC by the Assyrians, right? They had different sieges from Tiglath-Pileser to Shalmaneser V to all these different men, Pekah, all these men took down the northern kingdom. But again, here's the common point. He shall come as an eagle. So now we understand that men are likened unto eagles and ravenous beasts. Remember, we are a dove, So let's get this again. Ezekiel 17 and 3. Let's read it. It reads, and say, thus saith Yahweh, a great eagle with great wings, long-winded, full of feathers, which had diverse colors, came unto Lebanon and took the highest branch of the cedar. And all this great wings, long-winded, full of feathers, diverse colors, represent all of the different people and all of the different lands that were under the authority of Nebuchadnezzar II. Right? Let's pull this up. Let's pull up the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Right? Let's pull this up. Right? Here's the vastness. That's why it's long-winded, full of feathers and diverse colors. Because they took down different, entirely different nationalities, man. We were taken down. So you had Jews that were taken down. You had the Zidonians and men of Tyre were taken down. The Assyrians were taken down. The Medes essentially were under the jurisdiction, right? You had the Hittites. You had all these kingdoms that were taken down, you know? So you had long feathers in diverse colors. He came into Lebanon and took the highest branch of the cedar. Remember, this is a similitude. He didn't actually go to Lebanon. Lebanon, and most dark sayings, is a metaphor for the land of Israel. Why Lebanon? Right? Why not the desert? Why not a waste wilderness? Because Lebanon is a beautiful land. You know, especially in the ancient world. If you go to Lebanon now, it's nothing but Hezbollah, bombs, murderers, creeps, freakism. But in the ancient world, Lebanon was glorious, man. You know, Lebanon was a glorious land through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashim Yahushua. So the most beautiful land is going to be used to describe the Heavenly Father's chosen land, which is the land of Israel. So it's saying the Babylonians came to the land of Israel, right? But again, Israel is being called Lebanon. Hosea, let's get a precept. Hosea chapter 14 and verse number 5. I will be as the dew unto Israel. He shall grow as the lily and cast forth his roots as Lebanon. So we're going to take root in Lebanon. Did we literally take root in Lebanon? Did that actually happen? Did Joshua divide the land of Lebanon? No. But again, Lebanon, due to its beauty, its cedars, its splendor, its smell, its aroma, its trees, is likened to the land of Israel, right? His branches shall spread, and his beauty shall be as the olive tree, and his smell as Lebanon. They that dwell under his shadow shall return. They shall revive as the corn and grow as the vine. The scent thereof shall be as the wine of Lebanon. So you see how Lebanon is being described as a beautiful land with beautiful trees, beautiful branches, olive trees, a great aroma, beautiful wine, or great tasting wine, rather, right? So you see how Lebanon is being used. You know, let's go to Daniel 8. This is Daniel chapter 8 and verse number 9. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great toward the south and toward the east and toward the pleasant land. What's the pleasant land? Is it Baltimore? Is it LA? No, the pleasant land is the land of Israel, right? That's why it's fitting. It's perfect. It's a perfect similitude for Lebanon to describe Israel because they are Israel is the pleasant land, right? So what happened was during a siege, Nebuchadnezzar II and his army came and took down the land of Israel. They came into Lebanon. They came into the land of Israel. Again, you had 3 sieges, one in 605, one in 597, and one in 586. And when he came, he didn't come empty-handed. He came and took the highest branch of the cedar. The highest branch of the cedar is the chief family of the land of Israel, right? This is what you get your concept of a family tree from, right? That's what you get the concept of a family tree from. Let's pull this up. Every brother has seen a family tree. And the highest branch of your family tree is the strongest family within your family, man. You know, the strongest pedigree. Maybe they're the most successful. Maybe they're the most well-off. Maybe they're the most stable. Maybe they have the most wisdom. Everybody has people in their family that are good and bad, bad branches and bad twigs, and then you have good twigs and good branches. You know, so the highest branch is dealing with the Davidic bloodline, the house and the family of David. That is the highest branch, and the cedar is Israel, right? Because cedars are in Lebanon. So if Lebanon is the land of Israel, the cedar, which represents man, are the trees of Israel, right? Let's go to Isaiah 11 and 1, right? And we have to go through these precepts, right, to paint the picture. Isaiah chapter 11 and verse 1. And there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. So David is who? The son of Jesse. Remember, you had Boaz, you had Obed, right? And then you had Jesse, and then you had David. Then you had Solomon, and then you had Rehoboam, and you had all these different sons, Abijah and Asa, and all these men. And they all come out of the rod and the stem of Jesse, right? So men are trees in the Bible, right? We take root, we bear fruit, our leaves are understanding, right? All these things are described in the Bible explicitly. And the highest branch again deals with the lineage of David. Let's go to let's get a quick precept. Let's go to Joshua. We ever want Joshua chapter 15. Right? These are the families of Judah. Let's see, this is Joshua, kind of want 15 and 20. Joshua chapter 15 and 20. And this is the inheritance of the tribe of the children of Judah according to their families. So you had different families, right? You had different branches that were part of that cedar. But the chief family, the chief Judite family, is the Davidic bloodline, the lineage of David. He's the highest branch, or that is the highest branch of the cedar, right? Let's pull up David's, let's see, bloodline. Well, family tree. We'll do family tree. Or we really had the kings of Judah. I should go back to the kings of Judah. Let's go back to this. And let's see the kings of Judah, right? These are all the men that came out of David. David, Solomon, Rehoboam, Abijah, Asa, Jehoshaphat. All these men belong to the highest branch of the cedar. All right. Jehoram, Ahaziah. I'm not going to reference Athaliah. She was a woman, a wicked woman. Joash, Amaziah, Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah, Manasseh, Amnon, Josiah, Jehoahaz, Jehoiakim, Jehoiakim, and Zedekiah. Right? So all these men come from the highest branch of the highest cedar. Let's go back to this in Ezekiel chapter 17. Right? Verse number 4. Slakia. I want Ezekiel 17 and 4. He cropped off the top of his young twigs and carried it into a land of traffic. He set it in a city of merchants. So he came to the Davidic bloodline that lived in the land of Israel, and he took one of his young twigs. The twig is a small branch of a tree. So the young twig represents a man, right? Not just any man, a man that comes from this family tree. This man is none other than Jehoiakim, right? Let's pull this up again, right? This is the king that he took captive, right? Through the spirit and power of Yahweh and his only begotten son, Yahushua, right? Jehoiakim. He was taken captive and carried into a land of traffic. Now, the land of traffic is Babylon. That's a city of merchants. Let's prove that in history. Let's go to 2 Kings. Right? 2 Kings chapter 24. This is 2 Kings chapter 24 and verse number, let's start at, so I'm going to start at 12. I'm going to start at 10. At that time, the servants of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up against Jerusalem and the city was besieged. And Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came against the city, and his servants did besiege it. This is the actual history. This is the actual history that happened. And Jehoiakim, the king of Judah, went out to the king of Babylon. He and his mother and his servants and his princes and his officers, and the king of Babylon took him in the 8th year of his reign. And he carried out thence all the treasures of the house of the Lord and the treasures of the king's house, and cut in pieces all the vessels of gold which Solomon, king of Israel, had made in the temple of the Lord, as the Lord had said. And he carried away all Jerusalem and all the princes and all the mighty men of valor, even 10,000 captives, and all the craftsmen and smiths. None remained save the poorest of the people of the land. Here's the point. And he carried away Jehoiakim to Babylon. We just read that in Ezekiel 17. They took off the young twig and carried him to a land of traffic and set him in a city of merchants. So 2 Kings 24 and 15 links directly up with Ezekiel chapter 17 and verse 4. Right? So let's read 2 Kings again. Chapter 24 and 15. And he carried away Jehoiakim to Babylon, and the king's mother, and the king's wives, and his officers, and the mighty of the land. Those carried he into captivity from Jerusalem to Babylon, or parabolically from Lebanon to the land of traffic. So this goes into the captivity of the king. And traffic, for those that may not know, represents enterprise, business, trade, right? Trade, if you can understand, that's what traffic represents, right? Let's pull that up. We brought this up plenty of times. We'll bring it up again through the spirit and power of Yahweh Yahushua. Here's the etymology of the word traffic: transportation of merchandise for the purpose of trade. Trade, commerce, interchange of goods, merchandise, or property, right? From trafficare, to carry on trade. So you may sit in traffic on your way to work or from work, but that's because people are buying and selling. People are working. People are trading. You know, people are exchanging hours for currency, right? That's what a trade is. I'll give you 8 hours of my day in exchange for, X amount of dollars an hour. That's trade. Time for cash. People are going to grocery stores. People are leaving the bank. People are making moves. That's why you have traffic, which is it's a good sign. If you're a king and you have traffic, that's a beautiful thing. If you're a king and you have no traffic, more than likely your kingdom is poor. So every city, if you have traffic in your city and you run that city, it's a good sign. So he was set in Babylon, a rich, prosperous land. Let me get a quick precept on the land of traffic. I'm gonna stay in Second Esdras, Second Esdras, but I'm gonna go to the 3rd chapter. Right, Second Esdras, chapter 3, and verse number. Let's see. I want to start at. Let's start at 29. Right, I believe I want. Let's see. Bear with me. Second Esdras, chapter 3, and we'll start at 29. It reads, "For when I came thither and had seen impieties without number, then my soul saw many evil doers in the 30th year, so that my heart failed me." This is Ezra giving a recap. "For I have seen how thou sufferest them sinning, and hast spared wicked doers, and hast destroyed thy people, and hast preserved thine enemies, and hast not signified it." So he's speaking about how the heathen are in power. I want verse 33. This is the point. "And yet their reward appeareth not, and their labor hath no fruit. For I have gone here and there through the heathen, and I see that they flow in wealth. and think not upon thy commandments. So this goes into them being a land of traffic. They flow in wealth, a city of merchants, right? The richest empire. Daniel called it the head of gold in Daniel, the second chapter, right? You had the hanging gardens of Babylon. You had one of the ancient wonders of the world. You had marble and gold and all of these minerals and materials that you may not get today, man. You know, and he had all these things, so they were flowing in wealth. Let's go back to Ezekiel chapter 17 and verse number 5. So now we read that the Babylonians came and took down Jehoiakim and put him in slavery. That's what Ezekiel chapter 17, verse 3 and 4 is going into. Right? Ezekiel 17 and 5. He took also of the seed of the land and planted it in a fruitful field. He placed it by great waters and set it as a willow tree. So after Nebuchadnezzar II came and took Jehoiakim captive and carried him to the land of traffic, he needed a puppet king to rule on his behalf. So he set up Zedekiah. Zedekiah was set up to really be like I said, be a puppet, man. He didn't have power of his own authority and sovereignty. The power that he was given to him by the king of Babylon. America sets up puppet kings all the time. Trump is a puppet king. Half of these leaders, if not all of them in the EU, are puppet kings. When there's a war out there in Africa, West Africa, North Africa, somewhere in Venezuela, somebody gets assassinated. The so-called white man did that. And he'll set up a king that's going to follow his foreign policy. You know, but a lot of times these puppet kings, they'll look like the inhabitants of that land. You know, they're not going to take a Chinese man and put him in Venezuela. They're going to set up one of their own guys so the people could kind of, be confounded and not rebel. And that's an ancient custom. And that's what Nebuchadnezzar did. He took one of the seed of the land. Why is he called the seed of the land? Because he's one of the, he's of the lineage of the kings of Judah, right? Going back to this. Let's pull up Josiah's family tree, right? Let's pull up King Josiah's family tree so we can understand. You see these names, Jehoiakim, Zedekiah. You want to understand exactly who proceeds from who. All right, this is good. So you have David, Solomon, Rehoboam, jump down to Hezekiah. You have Manasseh, Amnon. Then you had Josiah. Now, Josiah had sons. He had Jehoiakim, a.k.a. Eliakim. You had Jehoahaz, a.k.a. Shalom. And you had Zedekiah, a.k.a. Mattaniah. So when Jehoiakim, right? When Jehoiakim was taken captive, his uncle, which is Zedekiah, was actually set up. Zedekiah is the fulfillment of Ezekiel chapter 17 and 5. He's the seed of the land because he came out of the loins of the king. Right? Who's the king? Josiah was the king. So he took him and he planted him in a fruitful field and placed it by great waters and set it as a willow tree. Why? Because his power was given to him by the king of Babylon. Right? And he wasn't set up as a cedar tree or an exalted tree. He was set up as a willow tree. Right? And a fruitful field and great waters represent the land of Israel. Let's get a quick precept on that. Right? Let's go to Ezekiel 20. The Lord calls it the glory of all lands. That's why it's called the fruitful field. And the fruit is the knowledge, the wisdom, and the understanding. Right? Ezekiel chapter 20 and 6. And the day that I lifted up mine hand unto them to bring them forth of the land of Egypt and to a land that I had espied for them, flowing with milk and honey, which is the glory, which is the glory of all lands. So there's no land greater than the land of Israel. Yasha Allah. That is the glory of all lands, beautifully situated, right? And elevated and walled off and secured is Jerusalem, right? So that's the fruitful field that we were put in, right? But when Zedekiah was set up, he was set up as a willow tree. The willow tree represents a tree of mourning, sadness, and captivity. That's what the willow tree represents. When you look up a willow tree, there's nothing happy about a willow tree, right? Pull this up, willow tree, right? Willow trees, their physical structure is they're bowed down. They're a submissive tree, right? Look at this, right? This is a willow tree. Like the Lord said, you have men that hang their head down. The willow tree is like a man hanging his head down. Look at this. So you compare the willow tree. So trees have different spirits related to them, you know? So let's pull up the cedar. We talked about the cedar tree. And you look at the cedar tree is upright, right? Let's pull this up. See, the cedar tree is tall and it's upright and it's strong. Now you compare that to the willow tree. The willow tree is submissive, is lowly, and it's often called the weeping willow. Why is it called, right, a weeping willow? The weeping willow gets its name from the appearance of raindrops running down its long leaves, making it look like the tree is crying, right? You see that? Here's another point. Why do they call them weeping willows? Its gently sloping or slopping branches resemble cascading tears, which is where the name comes from, right? So that's the willow tree. Zedekiah was set up as a willow tree. Let's go to Psalms 137. Let's get a precept for the willow tree, right? And why was he set up as a willow tree? Because he was set up in the days of captivity, in the days of mourning, in the days when the city was burnt down, right? In the days when the walls were broken down, in the days when you had a massive deportation of Jews. So we lost our glory. We didn't have that glory of the cedar. We didn't have that structure and that strength. We were completely depleted of gold, silver, our princes, our mighty men. So yeah, it's fitting that the Most High set us up as a willow tree at that time, right? Psalms chapter 137 and 1. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down. Yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. We hanged our harps upon the willows in the midst thereof. You see that? For there they that carried us away captive required of us song, and they that wasted us required of us mirth, saying, sing us one of the songs of Zion, right? And that's what they were doing, right? This is twofold. They currently do this. When we were brought over to captivity, we were forced to be their entertainers. During their holidays, their birthdays, other American festivities, the entertainment was the so-called Negro. Sing us one of those Negro spirituals. Sing us one of those songs. Dance for us, boy. Clap your hands for us, boy. Right? And they did this in Babylon. Same thing the ancient Babylonians did. All of our psalms and all of the things that we sung in the temple, they knew about those things. And they wanted to use us for their entertainment. So you see how hanging your harp upon a willow represents sadness. Okay? Sadness. Trees have different spirits. You know, the apple tree is likened to Yahushua, a Song of Solomon. The olive tree has a spirit behind it. The willow tree has a spirit behind it. The myrtle tree is low and it represents, being in the lowest state, but the myrtle tree is also beautiful. Right? You can read that in Zechariah, the 1st chapter. So let's read this again. He took also the seed of the land and planted it in a fruitful field, He placed it by great waters and set it as a willow tree. So this goes into what? Again, Nebuchadnezzar took Zedekiah and set him up as the puppet king in the land of Israel, right? He set him up. Let's see if I get a quick precept on that. Let's go to, I believe we can get Jeremiah, the 52nd chapter, right? This is Jeremiah chapter 52 and 1. Zedekiah was 120 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Hamutal, the daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah. And he did that which is evil in the sight of the Lord, according to all that Jehoiakim had done. Right? So that's one precept. Let's get another one. Let's go back to 2 Kings, right? About Zedekiah being set up. Right? And we have to go through this history, man. Right? You have to know this history. 2 Kings chapter 24 and verse 17. And the king of Babylon made Mattaniah, his father's brother, king in his stead, and changed his name to Zedekiah. So that 2 Kings 24 and 17 links directly up with what? Ezekiel 17 and 5. So how are you going to read Ezekiel and break it down if you never read the book of 1 Kings and 2 Kings? You would never get it. You'll never understand. Because all this is an allegory about what already happened. So you would have to go back and read those timelines and see that history so you can understand exactly what's going on. Right? Let's read on in Ezekiel 17 and 6. And it grew and became a spreading vine of low stature, whose branches turned toward him, and the roots thereof were under him. So it became a vine and brought forth branches and shot forth sprigs. So we read that Zedekiah was 21. He grew, but he didn't grow to his height. He was wicked, he rebelled, and he was a vine of a low stature. Just the old rebellious, average, low-level king. And the support that he received was from the king, his finances, the orders to give out, right? And what to do and how to govern the people. It was given to him by a man that was not an Israelite. That's what this part means right here when it says, whose branches turned toward him, and the roots thereof were under him. So all your roots are where you get your nutrients from, right? When you get your strength from. So the strength of Zedekiah was given to him by a wicked king, right? Who's that wicked king? Nebuchadnezzar II. Let's read on. Verse number 7. There was also another great eagle. And Zedekiah, he didn't have a happy ending. I'll put that out there, right? He didn't have a happy ending. Yeah, he was a low stature, but ultimately, let me read one more about this man, right? In Jeremiah, Zedekiah, man, right? Let's see what happened. He had a miserable judgment. Jeremiah chapter 52 and verse number 10. And the king of Babylon slew the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes. He slew also all the princes of Judah and Riblah. So Zedekiah was of a low stature. But remember, he rebelled. He actually rebelled against Nebuchadnezzar. He said, I'm sick of being this damn puppet king, man. Right? And he was a young guy, man. He was proud. He didn't submit to the will of the Most High. He was doing his own thing. He didn't bear the yoke of the king of Babylon. And he got jammed up for it. And he was 20 years old. 21 years old, man. And imagine that. The last thing that you ever see are your sons being killed. And immediately after he kill your sons, they pluck your eyes out. So that's your last memory. That'll haunt you for eternity. Verse number 11. Then he put out the eyes of Zedekiah, and the king of Babylon bound him in chains and carried him to Babylon and put him in prison till the day of his death. You see that? So that's the end of this man. That's his story. That's his lot. And it is what it is, man. His sons got killed right in front of him. Then they plucked his eyes out and they made sure he didn't bleed to death. Then they bound him in chains and deported him to Babylon. He didn't have an Uber. They didn't have a water bottle for him. They didn't, he didn't stop at a hotel and check in. He had to walk from Jerusalem to Babylon, man. Chained up, blind. And he was in prison, and he served a life sentence and died in prison. Right? It's a horrible lot, man. That is a horrible lot. And hey, Jake, go through this, man. The king of even today, the king of Babylon is the so-called white man. He'll arrest you and he'll put you in prison to the day you die. Right? For your sins. So let's go back to this in Ezekiel. Ezekiel chapter 17 and 7. There was also another great eagle with great wings and many feathers. And behold, this vine did bend her roots toward him and shot forth her branches toward him that he might water it. It's like by the furrows of her plantation. Now, what is this going into? Let's read it again. Ezekiel 17 and 7. There was also another great eagle with great wings and many feathers. This eagle is Pharaoh Hophra, right? Let's pull that up. Pharaoh Hophra, the king of Egypt, right? This sodomite, right? He's the other king that you read about in Ezekiel chapter 17, right? And that's another name you'll see. Pharaoh Apries or Apries, right? That's another one of the kings, right, of Egypt. So let's see if I can pull up a little bit about this guy. I'm not going to do a whole breakdown on this guy, right? But this is Pharaoh Hophra. He is the other eagle that you read about in Ezekiel chapter 17 and 7. So let's pull this up. Apries, which is the name by which Herodotus and Diodorus designate Wahibri Ha'ibri, a pharaoh of Egypt, from 589 to 570 BC, the fourth king of the 26th dynasty of Egypt. He was equated with the Wafres of Manetho, who correctly records that he reigned for 19 years. Apries is also called Hophra in Jeremiah 44 and 30, right? So he's one of the kings of Egypt, right? And what this is saying is, when he came on the scene, Zedekiah, part of his rebellion was to seek military and financial support from Egypt. That's what this means when it says this vine did bend her roots toward him. So instead of Zedekiah's roots being bent towards the king of Babylon, he said, nah, man, I can't deal with you no more. I want to be supported now and get help from Egypt. And he shot forth his branches to get watered by the military and financial aid of the Egyptians, right? But the Most High was against that, man. The Most High was against that plan and that rebellion, right? Let's get this in Jeremiah. I believe that's 37, right? This is Jeremiah chapter 37 and verse number 5. Then Pharaoh's army was come forth out of Egypt. And when the Chaldeans that besieged Jerusalem heard tidings of them, they departed from Jerusalem. Because again, you had Jews that were looking to get help from the Egyptians. Israel got a problem, man, of trusting not in the Most High, but rather trusting in man. Isaiah prophesied that in Isaiah the 30th chapter, in Isaiah the 31st chapter. Woe unto you or them that go down to Egypt for help, which trust in chariots and horses because they are strong and many, paraphrasing. Zedekiah did the same thing. Instead of repenting and returning back to the Most High, he said, I'm going to rebel against the prophecy and I must get help from Egypt. Let's read on. Verse number 6. Then came the word of the Lord unto the prophet Jeremiah, saying, Thus saith Yahweh, the God of Israel, thus shall ye say to the king of Judah, that sent you unto me to inquire of me, Behold, Pharaoh's army, which is come forth to help you, shall return into Egypt. So like it shall return to Egypt into their own land. And the Chaldeans shall come again and fight against the city and take it and burn it with fire. Thus saith Yahweh by Hashem Yahushai, deceive not yourselves, saying, the Chaldeans shall surely depart from us, for they shall not depart. So they tried to get help. The Most High said, hey, they ain't going to work out. They may have left for a minute, but I'm going to send them back, and they're going to wipe this whole city out. So that's what Ezekiel 17 and verse number 7 is talking about. It's talking about the relationship and the coonery that Zedekiah had, where he decided to be independent from the Most High, but be dependent upon these Hamites and get watered and nutrients and military aid from him, not knowing that the victories come from the Most High. Right? Let's read on in Ezekiel chapter 17. And they actually pulled, let me get one more, because they actually referenced Jeremiah 44 and 30. I believe that was that. So let's right, let's get that real quick. This is Jeremiah 44 and right. It's like, yeah. I want verse number 30. Right? It reads, Thus saith Yahweh, behold, I will give Pharaoh, Hophra, king of Egypt, into the hand of his enemies, and into the hand of them that seek his life, as I gave Zedekiah, king of Judah, into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, his enemy, that sought his life. So the same judgment that Zedekiah got his eyes put out, sons got killed, bound up in chains, deported to Babylon as a slave. The Lord said, in like manner, I'm going to judge Pharaoh Hophra, because he supported Zedekiah in a rebellion against me. That's what the Most High said by the mouth of Jeremiah, right? And that's what this Ezekiel chapter 17, 7 through 10 is going into. So let's read on in Ezekiel chapter 17 and verse number 8. It reads, It was planted in a good soil by great waters, that it might bring forth branches, and that it might bear fruit, that it might be a goodly vine. So the Lord said, hey, you were planted by the support of Egypt, that you might get help, you might win a war, you might stop the prophecy. But what the Most High said, say thou, thus saith Yahweh, shall it prosper? And shall he not pull up the roots thereof, and cut off the fruit thereof, that it wither? It shall wither in all the leaves of her spring, even with great power, or many people to pluck it up by the roots thereof. So you could try to, what the Most High is saying is, you could try to get help from the so-called white man, get support from Egypt, right? Vote, march, protest, riot, burn the building down, run for senator. You can do all that if you want to, man. If you don't take root by this living water and take root by the Most High, you're going to get plucked up, man. You have to be planted by the well of living waters. You can't plant yourself by the waters of Egypt and expect to prosper. Remember in 1 Corinthians, the 3rd chapter says, I have planted, Apollos watered, but the Most High gives the increase. So wherever you take root by, and the Most High will give the increase, or the Most High will cut you down, man. You cannot take root under the shadow of a heathen. Let me get that in Isaiah the 30th chapter. That's Jake's problem, man. Right? You always want to cover yourselves with the fig leaves and aprons of these other nations. Right? Just Isaiah 30 and 1. Woe to the rebellious children, said the Lord, that take counsel, but not of me, and that cover what they covering, but not of my spirit, that they may add sin to sin. Right? You take counsel from your therapist. You take counsel from your president when he does his national State of the Union address. You take counsel from your senator, your congressman. You don't take counsel from the Most High. You take counsel from your pastor, though. when you're getting that, or that wicked Edomite priest. It's in that hot, nasty box. And you say, Father, I have done so and so. You take counsel from help. You take counsel from the stars because you're an Aquarius and today's going to be your day. You take counsel from the fortune cookie out the hand of the dog-eating Moabite. You take counsel from the magic 8-ball that you bought at the pawn shop. You take counsel from your uncle who just got off crack. You take counsel from your mother who didn't tell you that she almost aborted you. You take counsel from your homeboy who just is goddamn shooting dice, man, in the alley somewhere. You take counsel from everybody but the Most High. You try on every garment, every outfit, every philosophy, every doctrine, but this truth. And you do that you can add sin to sin. Verse number 2, that walk to go down into Egypt and have not asked at my mouth, to strengthen themselves in the strength of Pharaoh and to trust in the shadow of Egypt. We're going to tell you something, man. When the sun come out, the Egyptian shadow can't save you, right? That Egyptian shadow ain't going to save you. When the sun and the affliction and the scorching heat prophesied in Revelation comes out, which is the destruction, at noonday, the Most High is going to do to you what he did to Jonah, right? You may not know, what did the Lord do to Jonah, right? Let's get this in Jonah. Jonah 4 chapter. Hey, the Lord sent the worm, man, right? This Jonah chapter 4 and verse 6. And the Lord prepared a gourd that it made it come up over Jonah, that it might be a shadow over his head to deliver him from his grief. So Jonah was exceeding glad of the gourd. So you could be getting afflicted by the sun, but the Most High can prepare a gourd, a tree, right? Leaves to protect you and give you shade. The Most High could do that. He did that to Jonah, right? He did that to Jonah. Jonah was exceedingly glad for the gourd, right? But God prepared a worm when the morning rose the next day, and it smote the gourd that it with it. And the Most High is doing that now. Everybody that's trusting in America, you're trusting in Trump. You thought, you're banking on that Dodge stimulus check, right? You're banking on Trump to save you, to make America great again. You Negroes, blacks for Trump. You sellouts, you coons, you weed smokers, you sellouts, you freaks, you sodomites who rest in America for Pride Month and freakism. The Most High prepared a worm. It's not an actual worm. The worm represents the plagues that the Most High is bringing on the earth, breaking down their economy, raising up Russia, raising up Iran, raising up China, dividing this society, right? Civil unrest, famine. That's the worm that the Most High is preparing to take away all of your shadows and all of your trees that you trust in, man. And it's going to wither away, and you ain't going to be saved by the sun. That sun is going to kill you, man. Right? And that's all parabolic. Verse 8. And it came to pass when the sun did arise, and that's coming. Noonday is coming. The sun is about to arise. And it came to pass when the sun did arise that the Most High prepared a vehement east wind, and the sun beat upon the head of Jonah that he fainted and wished himself to die and said, it is better for me to die than to live. Yeah, that reminds me of Revelation, the 9th chapter, when the Lord said, in those days, men are going to seek to die, seek death, but shall not find it. You're going to wish that you was dead in those days when the Most High take away your protection, when he break this society down. You're going to wish that you trusted in the shadow of the Most High. You're going to say it's better for me to die than live when your son is starving to death and you have to witness his body pining away due to no bread and no water. You're going to wish that you were dead when you're somewhere in some FEMA camp, right, being molested and used as a human guinea pig for these elites, man. You're going to wish that you were dead, man, when the sound of the grinding is low, man. And the mirth is taking out the land. And the east wind, so you got 4 winds in the Bible. You got the east wind, the west wind, the north wind, and the south wind. Now, this east wind, we read about the east wind back in Ezekiel, right? The vehement east wind. Let's go back to Ezekiel, right? I want to jump up because we read about the east wind, if I'm not mistaken, right? Let's see. Bear with me. Ezekiel 17, right? I may have to, let's see, bear with me. If not, we'll continue reading. Oh, here it is, Slack. It's 17:10, right? Ezekiel 17:10. Yea, behold, being planted, shall it prosper? Shall it not utterly wither when the east wind toucheth it? It shall wither in the furrows where it grew. So the east wind represents destruction, right? It's an actual wind that comes, but it's often used for destruction, right? It's a representation for destruction and judgment from the Most High, man. Right? That's how the Most High gets down with these with these different judgments and these different winds through the spirit. Right? Let me get a quick precept on that. Right? That's what the Most High is going to do to take away the shadow of Egypt. He's going to prepare that destruction. Right? Jeremiah, Genesis 41 and verse 27. One quick precept on the east wind. So the east wind represents judgment. The west wind represents mercy, right? The north wind represents the cold, or even the words of the Most High that come from the north, right? And you have the south wind, which represents quietness and heat, right? So all of those winds are literal, but they also represent different spirits, right? Genesis 41 and 27. And the 7 thin and ill-favored kind that came up after them are 7 years. And the 7 empty ears blasted with the east wind shall be 7 years of famine. So the east wind is always bringing destruction, right? The east wind brought destruction to the Egyptians. It split the Red Sea, right? And the Egyptians got cut down. Now, when you go into the west wind, I believe that's in Ezekiel 14. Exodus 14, right? Concerning the west wind, right? 10, This Exodus chapter 10 and verse number 19. And Yahweh turned a mighty strong west wind, which took away the locust and cast them into the Red Sea. There remained not one locust in all the coast of Egypt. So the east wind brings destruction and plagues and madness, but the west wind is the just balance. The west wind brings mercy, right? And that's what the Most High gave for a period of time. The west wind represents the Most High's grace, because you can get smitten and destroyed by the east wind, but if the Most High bring that west wind to you, and there's a little bit of a reviving and a little bit of peace that comes from that, right? Let's get this in our loop. Just touching on these different winds real quick. Then we're going to jump to Ezekiel 19. Luke chapter 12 and 55. And when ye see the south wind blow, ye say there will be heat, and it cometh to pass. So the south wind brings that heat, right? And the north wind brings what? It brings the cold, right? It brings the cold. Let's go to Job 37. Right? Job 37 and 9. Out of the south cometh the whirlwind, and cold out of the north. Right? So out of the north comes the cold, out of the south comes the heat, out of the east comes the strong wind, out of the west comes the more of the calming winds. And that's all 4 the winds that operate on a day-to-day basis. Right? Now there's another I want to get this real quick through the spirit and power of Yahweh, right? Here's what I want. I want Proverbs 25 and 13. And I want to move on. Proverbs 25 and 13. As the cold of snow in the time of harvest, so is a faithful messenger to them that send him. For he refresheth the soul of his masters. So when that cold north wind blow, it's equivalent to the gospel. The faithful messenger are the prophets, the apostles, the men of the Lord that give you the living water and refresh your soul and the soul of his master. The master is Hamashiach Yahushua. The messengers are the men of the Lord. And if we're obedient to the will of the Most High, right, the master is refreshed. He's pleased with us. So the good messengers and the faithful messengers in the gospel and the word of God are likened unto cold winds to refresh your soul, right? And there's another precept that speaks about the quietness that comes from the south wind, right? So in Ezekiel 17, the Most High said, when that east wind comes, all of the shadows and the trees of Egypt are going to fail, and there won't be a west wind, right? It's just straight destruction. So I'm going to read this one more time. Ezekiel chapter 17:10. Yeah, behold, being planted, shall it prosper? Shall it not utterly wither? When the east wind toucheth it, it shall wither in the furrows where it grew. So your relationship with Egypt is going to fail. You want to make it plain? That's what God is saying. Yahweh, Bashmi Awashai. The relationship between Judah, led by Zedekiah, and you think that this Egyptian empire is going to save you, it's not going to happen. I'm going to shut it down because you didn't put your trust under my shadow, right? You didn't plant your roots by my waters. That's Ezekiel 17. That's what it's going into. Now, let's go to Ezekiel 19, right? Let's see where we at with time. Right through the spirit, Salakia, and power of Yahweh and his only begotten son, Yahushua. Right? Let's see where we at. Okay, Ezekiel chapter 19. Ezekiel chapter 19:1. Moreover, take thou up a lamentation for the princes of Israel. So a lamentation is a essentially like a sad song. Okay, that's what a lamentation is. It often is used by prophets like Jeremiah, certain men that describe our people being taken captive, being destroyed by the enemy, being afflicted by the curses, and being judged by the Most High. That's why we have lamentations, right? And the Lord said, take up a lamentation for the princes of Israel. So what we're going to read, this isn't happiness. This isn't a good thing that we're about to read. We're going to read about the judgments that befell our kings and our people for rebellion, right? Getting into the house of mourning. Verse number 2. And say, what is thy mother? A lioness. She lay down among lions. She nourished her whelps among young lions. And she brought up one of her whelps. It became a young lion, and it learned to catch the prey. It devoured men. So thy mother, a lioness, is really going into Jerusalem, right? The land is feminine. That's why you plant your seed in the soil. Men are called husbandmen due to the fact that they're planting their seeds, right? Your seed is obviously your sperm, right? Just putting that out there. And it's planted in the woman, and then the fruit of the womb is the reward. So lands are always feminine, right? That's why Jerusalem is called the mother. In Galatians 4:26, it says, but Jerusalem, which is above, is free, is the mother of us all. Even these Edomites are called Russia, their motherland, right? Most countries, there's something always called a motherland, right? The motherland is a country in which you or your ancestors were born and to which you still feel emotionally linked, even if you live somewhere else. Synonyms: native land, homeland, fatherland, right? So Jerusalem is the motherland. That's why she's called, what is thy mother? A lioness, right? Let's get a precept on this. Let's go to 2nd Ezra, the 10th chapter, right? Let's go to 2nd Ezra chapter 10. What is thy mother? A lioness. Speaking about the land of Israel, but it's feminine due to the fact that all lands are feminine, right? All lands are feminine. Most things that men possess, when they possess it, it's feminine. Ships, Most ships, if not all of them, have feminine names, right? Cars, certain things. Men they deem these things when they become into their possession. They give them feminine names because they own them. They become their possession, right? Let me see if I can just type that in. Why? Let's see if they have that. Why do ships have? Let's see. Let's see. Female pronouns. Okay, it says another tradition is to consider ships as female, referring to them as she, right? Like they say, there she goes, and you see that in the movies and all of that stuff. Although it may sound strange, referring to an inanimate object as she, this tradition relates to the ideal of a female figure, such as a mother, see that? Like Ezekiel 19, or a goddess guiding and protecting a ship or a crew. Right? Let's get one more in that. And you can equate this to land. The practice of referring to ships as she has maritime origins. Sailors historically viewed ships as feminine, perhaps due to the nurturing qualities associated with women. Ships were often named after women, reinforcing this gendered language. Same thing with lands. Exact same thing with lands. That's when the man conquers a land, he sticks his flag in that land. Once he sticks his flag in that land now submits to him. The fruit of the land, the beast of the land, the vegetation of that land, it now belongs to him. That becomes his possession. And the Lord, let me get that in Jeremiah 30. There's a spirit behind sticking your flag in the land once you conquer it. Jeremiah chapter 3:1, quick precept. They say, if a man put away his wife and she go from him and she become another man's, shall he return into her again? Shall not that land be greatly polluted? But thou hast played the harlot with many lovers, yet return again to me, said the Lord. See that? So if your woman commit adultery or fornication, the Lord calls her a land, and now she's polluted, right? You put her away, right? Let's get 2nd Ezra 10. 2nd Ezra chapter 10 and verse number 7. This is Ezra speaking. How that Zion, our mother, is full of heaviness and much humbled, mourning very sore. So this is plain. Zion is our mother. That's plain. 2nd Ezra 10 and 7. You don't need an in-depth breakdown for that. But you may need another precept. So we're going to go to Baruch, right? Let's go to Baruch. So the mother being a lioness represents our land, the land of Israel, the land of Judah, primarily the kingdom of Judah, if you will. This is Baruch chapter 4 and verse number 10. For I saw the captivity of my sons and daughters, which the everlasting brought upon them. This is Jerusalem speaking, like a mother who lost her sons and daughters. With joy did I nourish them, but sent them away with weeping and mourning. Let no man rejoice over me a widow, and forsaken of many, who for the sins of my children am left desolate, because they departed from the law of God. So now you see Jerusalem is being likened to a woman or a mother, even in Baruch, the 4th chapter, right? So again, that's why it's important to go through these precepts. So now we know in Ezekiel 19 and 2 that this is speaking about the kingdom of Judea, right? It says, what is thy mother, a lioness? She lay down among the lions. She nourished her whelps among the young lions. So we were surrounded amongst the other nations, right? And amongst the people. And she brought up one of her whelps. It became a young lion, and it learned to catch the prey. It devoured men. So she brought up one of her whelps. A whelp is what? A cub, right? Like you had Mufasa, right? The king lion, and you had Simba, right? Simba was a whelp, right? Now, the land brings forth the men of that land. And a whelp would represent Jehoahaz. He's one of the kings that was set up. Jehoahaz. Let's pull this back up. Here's Jehoahaz, who reigned from 609 to 609, right? He only had a few months. And it's beautiful. They put the precept right here. 2 Kings 23, verses 31. And we're going to read maybe to 35, but maybe to 34, right? So let's read about that prophecy or this lamentation being fulfilled. 2 Kings, right? It's like, yeah, chapter 23, right? We're going to read 31 through 34. I know he put 35. I believe I just want 34. Right? This is 2 Kings chapter 23 and 31. Jehoahaz was 23 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 3 months in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Hamutal, the daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah. So this is the young whelp that was raised up. And he did that which was evil in the sight of Yahweh, Bahashim Yahushai, according to all that his fathers had done. And Pharaoh Necho put him in bands at Riblah in the land of Hamath, that he might not reign in Jerusalem, and put the land to a tribute of 100 talents of silver and a talent of gold. You see that? So he was set up, right? He was in power. He reigned 3 months. The Egyptians put him in slavery and put taxes and tribute on Israel. Let's see this actually. It's like it actually being fulfilled in Ezekiel 19. Let's go back to this. Ezekiel 19:3. And she brought up one of her whelps. It became a young lion, and it learned to catch the prey. It devoured men. And when you have a wicked king, that's what wicked kings do, man. Right? They make their own people to prey. They devour men. They lead men astray. They make men serve other gods. They freak off. They commit idolatry. That's in Jeremiah, the 5th chapter. For among my people are found wicked men. Let's get that in Jeremiah 5 real quick, right? Let's get that. This is the book of Jeremiah, chapter 5 and 26. For among my people are found wicked men. They lay wait as he that setteth snares. They set a trap. They catch men. So in Ezekiel 19, when it said he catch men or caught prey and devoured it, really is going into hell. Doesn't mean he was conquering nations, because Jehoahaz didn't conquer nations. He only ruled 3 months. The people that he was catching and devouring and leading astray was really Israel, man. The Jews. He didn't set them up for success, man. He didn't bring them back to the Most High, right? He didn't bring them back to Yahweh. So he devoured men through philosophies and doctrines. That's what it means. You catch prey. Right? Let's go read on in Ezekiel 19:4. The nations also heard of him, and he was taken in their pit, and they brought him with chains into the land of Egypt. We just read that. The Egyptians and Pharaoh Necho bound him in Riblah and took him to Egypt and put him in slavery. We just read it in 2 Kings 23:31 on down. And he laid upon the land 100 talents of gold and silver, paraphrasing. Right? So this man, he didn't have a long kingdom. Right? He didn't have a long kingdom. You know, eventually the Most High took this stuff away from him, and he was cut down. Right? Who did this happen to? Jehoahaz. Right? Let's pull up Jehoahaz. Right? So like, I believe you can read about this man in Jeremiah as well. Right? One of the kings of Judah. Right? One of the kings of Judah. You can read about him in Jeremiah 22. Right? This is Jeremiah chapter 22 and 10. Weep ye not for the dead, neither bemoan him, but weep sore for him that goeth away, for he shall return no more, nor see his native country. It happens all the time to us. For thus saith the Lord concerning, it's like you're touching Shallum, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, which reigned instead of Josiah, his father, which went forth out of his place. He shall not return thither anymore. So Shallum is another name for Jehoahaz. But he shall die in the place whether they have led him captive, and shall see this land no more. So this is a prophecy of Jehoahaz being put in slavery by the king of Egypt and never returning back. Right? Let's pull up Shalom. Right? And it says retribution. The third son of King Josiah of Judah and subsequent king of Judah reigned for 3 months before he was taken captive to Egypt, where he was placed in chains and later died, also Jehoahaz. So the first young lion in Ezekiel 19 that was taken in their pit and brought in chains is Shalom, also known as, or aka, Jehoahaz. Let's read on in Ezekiel chapter 19 and 5. Now when she saw that she had waited and her hope was lost, then she took another of her whelps and made him a young lion. So after he was taken captive, they didn't get word from him, he didn't come back, Judah set up another king. Right? Verse number 6. And he went up and down among the lions. He became a young lion and learned to catch the prey and devoured men. So he had the same similar sins as the wicked kings of Judah. He caught prey and devoured men. Let's get a precept on this. Let's get one more precept on catching prey and devouring men. Let's go to Micah chapter 3. Right? This is the book of Micah chapter 3 and verse number 2. I'll start at 1. And I said, hear, I pray you, O heads of Jacob, and ye princes of the house of Israel. Is it not for you to know judgment, who hate the evil and love the good, who pluck off their skin from off them and their flesh from off their bones, who also eat the flesh of my people and flay their skin from off them, and they break their bones and chop them in pieces, as for the pot, right? And as the flesh within the cauldron. So what does it mean they eat the people, right? They destroyed them, man, by leading them to sin, right? And you had actual murderers, man, like Manasseh, who shed innocent blood, right? You have men that committed witchcraft, made people naked spiritually. That's what it means you eat the flesh. You strip away their garment, you just utterly take them away from the Most High. That's what Ezekiel 19 is saying when they learned to catch the prey and they devoured men. Zedekiah, that's who this is going into, did the exact same thing that Jehoahaz did. See, after Josiah was the last righteous king, Jehoiakim, Zedekiah, they were all off. They all went off. They all went off. Let's read on. So even though Jehoahaz, he didn't even learn from Jehoahaz, who just got put into slavery. Jehoiakim got put in slavery. Jehoiakim got put in slavery. And now you got this guy, right? Ezekiel 19 and 7. And he knew their desolate palaces, and he laid waste their cities, and the land was desolate, and the fullness thereof by the noise of his roaring. Right, because the Most High said in Sirach chapter 4, be not a lion in your house. And that's how he was. Man, he's a young lion, but he was a lion in his own house, the house of Judea. He destroyed the people, man. He rebelled against the king. He hated Jeremiah. He despised the words of God. And he laid the land desolate, man, by the noise of his roaring. Let me get that in Sirach chapter 4, 30. Right? He became a lion in his own house, man. A young lion. Ecclesiasticus chapter 4 and 30. Be not as a lion in thy house, nor frantic among thy servants. Right? What does this mean? It means don't be in your house being an animal, man. Right? You're flipping over tables, yelling at everybody, right? You're throwing dishes around, man. You're putting a spirit on everybody. Everybody's scared of you. You walk in the door and all you hear is footsteps and people flee. And you hear a door slam. As soon as you walk in the house from the plantation, all you hear is and doors shut, man. And all mirth goes out the window because you're a mean man. Right? Don't put a spirit of fear in people in your house, man. It says, nor frantic among thy servants. And also, don't be the fearful one, man. Don't be the brother, the father, head of the household in the midst of adversity. You get frantic. You start shaking. And they put a spirit on everybody else and they start shaking. You start crying, everybody else start crying. Right? You have to be mindful and cognizant of how you move as the head of the household is how the whole household is going to move. So, referencing Ezekiel, the 19th chapter, and concerning Zedekiah, by the noise of his roaring and him being a lion in his house, he laid the land desolate. He rebelled against the words of God, man. And he scoffed and he scorned against his maker. So let's go back to this in Ezekiel 19. Ezekiel chapter 19 and verse number 8. The nations set against him on every side from their provinces and spread their net over him. He was taken in their pit. Why? Because this goes into the Babylonians taking down Jerusalem, right? And it says nations, because you had the Edomites that was there that burnt the temple down. You had all these nations, man, that conspired against the kings of Judah. For the Second Kings, right? This is Second Kings chapter 25 and verse number 1, right? And it came to pass in the 9th year of his reign, in the 10th month, in the 10th day of the month, that Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came he and all his host against Jerusalem and pitched against it, and they built forts against it. Right? So Helm and all his host, all these nations came and took down Jerusalem. Huh? They came and took down Jerusalem. 2 Kings 24 and 1. And in his days, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up, and Jehoiakim became his servant 3 years. Then he turned and rebelled against him. And the Lord sent against him bands of the Chaldees, and bands of the Syrians, and bands of the Moabites, and bands of the children of Ammon, and sent them against Judah to destroy it, according to the word of the Lord, which he spake by his servants, the prophets. So that links directly up. 2 Kings 25 and 1 and 2 Kings 24, 1 and 2 link directly up with Ezekiel 19 and 8 when it says, then the nations, the Chaldees, the Moabites, all those heathen, the Ammonites, they conspired against the Jews, right? It was a collective onslaught and destruction. When all these nations, like they've always done, they've always collectively conspired against the sons of God from the days of the Garden of Eden until this very moment. Right now, as we speak, these nations fulfilling Psalms 83 are still conspiring against us. So that's nothing new. Everybody knows that. Well, that's what happened during the days of Zedekiah. Right? It says, then the nations set against him on every side from the provinces and spread their net over him, and he was taken in their pit. And they put him in ward and chains and brought him to the king of Babylon. They brought him into holds that his voice should no more be heard upon the mountains of Israel. Right? So we know what happened with him. Thy mother is like a vine in thy blood, planted by the waters. She was fruitful and full of branches by reason of many waters. So this is another parable, but it's going into the exact same thing, right? We're a vine, right? We're a vineyard, right? We're likened it to husbandmen, right? We're likened it to trees, grass. So our mother is a vine, right? It's going into what? The land. Same thing, right? Exact same thing. Let's just get one precept on that, the vine. Let's get the classic in Isaiah 5 and 7, right? It reads, for the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah his pleasant plant. And he looked for judgment, but behold oppression, for righteousness, but behold a cry. So we're the vine, we're the vineyard, we're the pleasant plant, right? We're the holy right seed, right? Verse number 11. And it says, let me read this latter part. She was fruitful and full of branches by reason of many waters, because the Lord gave us laws, statutes, commandments, right? The Most High gave us a promised land, hedged up by angels, you know. Verse 11. And she had strong rods for the scepters of them that bear rule. And her stature was exalted among the thick branches, and she appeared in her height with the multitude of her branches. Why? What is this going into? The different kings that were set up. That's what this means. And she had strong rods for the scepters of them that bear rule. Certain Judite kings had strong rule. They had nations under tribute. Right? Uzziah had nations under tribute. Hezekiah had nations under tribute. Solomon, David, fierce kings, terrible kings, man. That ruled on this side of the Jordan. So we have prominent kings. Don't think that we're just a nation that was always licking boots of heathen. There were times when our kings, and I'm not going to go through every account, actually had these other nations in check. David built garrisons in Edom. He spent 6 months killing every male in Edom. And if it wasn't for Hadad the Edomite, all Esau would have got cut off. And David and Joab's zeal. Uzziah had these heathen in captivity. Hezekiah had these heathen in check. So that we had strong rods for the scepters of them that bear rule. You know? That's why, one more point, when you read about the letters that Sanballat, Tobias, and all these wicked heathen made in the days of Nehemiah, they actually said that. They said that the Jews had terrible kings, you know, who are mighty kings who ruled on the side of the Jordan, man, right? Through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashem Yahushua, right? So like you bear with me, right? So they actually referenced that. Right, about our kings that used to rule. Now I'm gonna read this. Right, this is Ezra. That's what I want. I want Ezra 4. Here's a precept. Right, Ezra chapter 4 and verse 20. There have been mighty kings. This is what the heathen said. They said this. There have been mighty kings also over Jerusalem, which have ruled over all countries beyond the river, and toll, tribute, and custom was paid unto them. So even the heathen know we had mighty kings, man. Wasn't just guys sitting around twiddling our thumbs, man. Our kings were engineers, right? Priests. Our kings were prophets, wise men of renown. And that's what Ezekiel 19 is saying. When it says, and she had strong rods for the scepters of them that bear rule. A scepter is an instrument of judgment and royalty for a king. It reads, and her stature was exalted among the thick branches, and she appeared in her height with the multitude of her branches. Because our land, this goes into the how David and Solomon expanded our land and our boundaries. And we became one of the strongest nations for a period of time. When you look up the boundaries, let's pull up the boundaries of Solomon's kingdom. Right? Let's pull this up. Right through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashem Yahushua. Here's Solomon's empire. Right? I like this map right here because it breaks it down. Right? So again, this is a map legend or a map key. Everything in the yellow is area under strong economic influence of Solomon. Then everything in the orange is area conquered by David that Solomon inherited. And everything in the red is what David had, you know, when he became the king. So you see how our bows were spread and we became fierce kings, you know, amongst all of the nations of the East. And that's what Ezekiel 19 is talking about. It's talking about how the Most High set us up as a kingdom. The land was growing, right? We expanded our boundaries, right? It was divided by lot, and we had mighty kings that ruled. That's Ezekiel 19 and 11. Let's read on. Ezekiel 19 and 12. But she was plucked up in fury. She was cast down to the ground. And the east wind, see that, dried up her fruit. Her strong rods were broken and withered. The fire consumed them. And that's what the Babylonians did, man. They came and set fire to the temple. Really, the Edomites, when you read First Ezra, the 4th chapter, the Edomites are the ones that actually set fire to the temple. They're the ones that asked. And they went out of their own will, man, to burn down Jerusalem. And now she is planted in the wilderness in a dry and thirsty ground. That's our land being destroyed and our people in captivity. A fire is going out of a rod. It's like a fire is going out of a rod of her branches, which hath devoured her fruit, so that she hath no strong rod to be a scepter to rule. This is a lamentation and shall be for a lamentation. So the whole land was destitute, man. Read the book of Nehemiah. The walls were burnt down. The temple was cast off and destroyed. The holy vessels were stolen and taken by the hands of lawless enemies of God. The people were destitute. This is a lamentation and shall be for a lamentation. And there's one more particular point I want to go back to in Ezekiel 17. Right? Let's read Ezekiel chapter 17 and verse 22. Thus saith Yahweh, I will also take up the highest branch of the high cedar and will set it. I will crop off from the top of his young twigs a tender one and will plant it upon a high mountain and eminent. Now, this is a prophecy of Yahweh Shah, right? Ezekiel 17 is also a prophecy of our Lord Yahweh Shah, right? The cedar is what? The nation of Israel, right? The highest branch, again, is the Davidic bloodline. The cropping off the top of his young twigs, a tender one, is Yahweh Shah. The seeds of the seed of David. Now, how do you know he's the tender one? Right? Let's go to Isaiah. There's Isaiah 52, right? Let's see. Isaiah, it's lucky. Let's see, 53. I believe that's what I want. Isaiah 53 and 2. Speaking of Yahweh Shah, for he shall grow up before him as a tender plant. So he's the tender one. And as a root out of a dry ground. He hath no form nor comeliness. And when we shall see him, there is no beauty that we should desire him. See that? So he's the tender plant or the tender one in Ezekiel chapter 17. Right? And the high mountain and eminent represents the kingdom of Jerusalem. Right? Different kingdoms are likened unto mountains. That's Revelation 17 and 9, Jeremiah 3 and 23, etc. And the mountain of the height of Israel will I plant it, and it shall bring forth boughs and bear fruit, and be a goodly cedar. And under it shall dwell all fowl of every wing, and the shadow of the branches thereof shall they dwell. Because everybody's going to have to submit to Yahweh Shah. Every knee shall bow, and every tongue shall confess. That's what this means. All of the fowls, the beasts of the field, they're all going to be under the shadow of Yahweh Shah. And all the trees of the field, meaning all the men of the earth. The field is the world. That's Matthew 13 and 38. Trees are men. We covered that already. And all the trees of the field shall know that I, Yahweh, have brought down the high tree. That's the so-called white man. Have exalted the low tree, right? That's Yahweh Shah, right? In the kingdom of Israel. Have dried up the green tree. The green tree is a society that's flourishing, right? Banks, markets, an economy, traffic, trade, buying, selling, enterprise, illuministic powers that be. This is the green tree. The Lord is going to dry up that green tree and have made the dry tree to flourish. The dry tree represents us, or really Yahweh Shah. I, the Lord, have spoken and have done it. And with that, we're going to close up, giving, of course, our honor and glory to Yahweh. That's ancient history and timelines, Ezekiel chapter 17 and 19. Most High willing you are edified. Kwam Yasha. Shalom.